Please don't drink that, Mr. Alexander. Something was placed in the glass by her fiancé. Like thunder on a clear day, Kesha Washington's scream pierced the main hall's exquisite calm. 50 guests in beautiful dresses and tuxedos froze in an instant. The 42-year-old billionaire Alexander Sterling paused, a glass of Dom Perignon champagne within inches from her mouth. Her ideal fiancée, Victoria Blackwood, went white as if she had seen a ghost. Shivering like a leaf, the 35-year-old cleaning lady stood at the hall's entrance. Still holding the cleaning bucket, her gaze focused on the golden glass, glistening beneath the crystal chandeliers. Her deep voice reverberated throughout the mahogany and marble room as Alexander carefully lowered the glass and said, "What did you say?" The first to react was Victoria, who leaped from her chair with calculated, "Grace, darling, pay no attention to this person. Her has clearly lost her mind." Safety. Although her voice sounded steady, Kesha could not help but notice the little quiver in her well-groomed palms. The stunned visitors were so silent that you could hear the silver cutlery clinking discreetly as they left. Some muttered angrily that it was ridiculous for a mere employee to interrupt the year's most significant business dinner. Kesha inhaled deeply. For 12 years, she had been invisible and unnoticed while cleaning the houses of Manhattan's wealthy. Her ears, however, had listened to bits and pieces of discussions in recent weeks that chilled his blood. Secret meetings in the office, whispered phone conversations, and odd bottles that came and went from the kitchen. Kesha added in a firmer voice, "I saw her tampering with her glass, sir, and I discovered odd items concealed in her room." His gaze stabbed the cleaning lady like invisible knives, but Victoria gave a crystalline chuckle. "This woman obviously has mental health issues, Alexander, my love. Perhaps it's time to examine our hiring standards." Alexander stopped two security guards from approaching Kesha by raising his hand. His piercing blue eyes flickered between the employee who had just made an unbelievable charge and his fiancée, whom he had loved for 3 years. Nobody in that room was aware that Kesha Washington was more than simply a typical housekeeper. She got a degree in chemistry from Howard University, but she had to give up her job after being falsely accused of stealing at her former lab. Now operating in the background, his scientific expertise at last found a use she never would have thought possible. The fate of 3 lives lingered in the air like smoke for what felt like an eternity. Alexander glanced at Kesha, then at Victoria, then back at the glass. A drama that would make national headlines now centered on the cleaning lady, who had always been treated like furniture. Kesha said, "Please, sir," her eyes brimming with tears but her posture unwaveringly determined. "Don't drink it, please." In that moment, Alexander Sterling understood that his opulent lifestyle, which was based on lucrative contracts and smart partnerships, was going to come to an end in a manner that even her top solicitors could not have foreseen. It was a straightforward and terrible question that kept repeating in her head. What if the woman he loved was attempting to murder him? Which version of the truth would win that silent battle between 2 women from utterly different worlds? As well as who would survive or die, would depend on what transpired over the course of the next several minutes. Subscribe to the channel if you're curious about how a regular cleaning lady mustered the bravery to confront the most influential members of New York's elite. This tale of justice is only getting started. It was very quiet in the hallway. 50 of the most influential business people in New York observed the spectacle as if it were a thriller. Unsure whether to call his lawyers or laugh at the ridiculous circumstances. Like a seasoned actress managing her audience, Victoria Blackwood turned to the visitors and laughed again, louder this time. Take a look at this absurd circumstance. A cleaning lady, attempting to use her hallucinations to destroy the most significant event in our life. Alexander's glass remained in his hand, but his sharp eyes were fixed intently on Kesha. "What kind of strange things did you find?" he said, in a measured tone that showed neither conviction nor skepticism. Disregarding the hostile glances around her, Kesha answered, "Small bottles hidden in her bathroom cabinet, liquids that are neither perfume nor medicine." She was discussing a permanent solution to the Alexander problem over the phone yesterday. Victoria paused for a moment before gathering herself. How ridiculous. It's obvious that a lady is fabricating claims to attract attention, Alexander said. She might have untreated mental health conditions. Kesha felt like she was being stabbed in the back by the remark concerning mental health issues. The exact same terms were used by her bosses to reject her findings of anomalies in new drug trials 12 years prior. When she was employed at a famous pharmaceutical laboratory in Boston, Kesha, perhaps you're seeing things. Perhaps you need expert assistance. Research items valued at $500,000 vanished from the facility 2 weeks later. Kesha was summarily dismissed, accused of stealing, and placed on a pharmaceutical business blacklist. Her career as a scientist had ended before it had really started. When Kesha said, "I'm not crazy," her voice became more intense. The remark sparked an outraged mutter among the guests, "And I recognize chemical compounds when I see them. I've been cleaning rich people's houses for 12 years, and I've learnt that you always underestimate those you consider inferior." One socialite murmured to her table neighbor, "How dare she insult us?" Victoria exploited the guest's negative response. "Does it seem obvious to you that this woman harbors a great deal of animosity against successful people? Call security. Right away, Alexander, honey, before she tries anything very risky." Using his first name for the first time in their 12 years of collaboration, he said, "Kesha, do you have complete confidence in what you're saying?" It was a really serious question. Kesha was aware that her response would impact not just that night's outcome, but also her life's course. He would be sued, arrested, and permanently destroyed if she was mistaken. She was unable to prove whether she was correct. She firmly answered, "My name is Mr. Sterling. I can also demonstrate it." Victoria laughed hysterically. "Show it how, with what proof? Do you think that's true?" A mere housekeeper. The disdain in her voice was evident even though she did not complete the phrase. Kesha saw something that no one else had seen at that very moment. Despite the room's strong air conditioning, Victoria was perspiring covertly. As she held the glass of water, her hands, which were always flawlessly controlled, trembled a little. Above all, she had not explicitly denied possessing the vials. Miss Victoria did not claim to have the vials. Kesha remarked coolly, "Mr. Sterling." All she said was that my accusations are ridiculous. The room was silent once more. Everyone looked to Victoria, anticipating a clear-cut and unequivocal rejection. Victoria paused 2 seconds. Even though it was only 2 seconds, Alexander noticed. "Of course," she finally said, "I deny it." What an absurd query. However, a number of others had already spotted the hesitancy. Alexander's close friend and real estate tycoon, Mr. Patterson, bent down to whisper something in her ear. Kesha inhaled deeply. She had spent years watching influential individuals in their hour of greatest need, cleaning their homes when they thought they were alone. She had developed the ability to read body language, spot deceit, and tell when someone was concealing anything. Above all, she had discovered that those in positions of authority always undervalued those they deemed invisible. Kesha remarked, "May I make a suggestion, Mr. Sterling?" With a confidence that shocked everyone. "What if we asked someone to visit Mrs. Victoria's room and look in the bathroom cabinet on the right side, behind the imported hair items, and in the bottom drawer?" Alexander's eyebrows shot up at the location's specificity. For her part, Victoria was clearly upset. That constitutes a breach of privacy. "I refuse to let an employee set the rules in my own house. It's not yet his home," Alexander stated icily. "It will also be simple to prove whether Kesha is lying." He left the sentence hanging, threatening, "If she is telling the truth." Kesha Washington felt she had gone too far at that point. However, she was now ready for the fight that would come, unlike 12 years earlier, when she had been a young, gullible scientist. Because she had discovered something that Victoria Blackwood would never comprehend after spending so many years cleaning homes, observing, and being treated like furniture. Sometimes the biggest advantage anyone can have is being undervalued. Additionally, Kesha concealed her most potent card, while Victoria wasted her time attempting to publicly humiliate her. That night would become a nightmare Victoria would never forget, because to a 23-minute recording, you could feel the tension in the hall. Victoria attempted to reclaim control of the situation by moving among the visitors with grace, much like a queen protecting her domain. She made a theatrical gesture and remarked, "Just look at the ridiculous situation we find ourselves in. A domestic servant attempting to instruct individuals who have established empires in chemistry." The room reverberated with the anxious laughter of the guests. How embarrassing for Alexander. How can he allow a maid to cause such a scandal? Mr. Patterson murmured to her. Alexander stayed still, examining both women. Contradictory signals were picked up by her business mind, which was trained to spot deceit in deals worth millions of dollars. Victoria's perspiration had increased. In contrast, Kesha maintained an unsettlingly composed demeanor for someone who had just leveled such a grave charge. Kesha calmly asked, "Mr. Sterling, may I ask Mrs. Victoria a simple question?" "Absolutely not." Victoria cried before Alexander could answer. "I refuse to be questioned by a maid." Several attendees were drawn to the adamant refusal. If Victoria had nothing to hide, why would she be afraid of straightforward inquiries? Kesha inhaled deeply. After cleaning mansions for 12 years, she had discovered that influential people consistently made the same error. Those they viewed as inferior were totally undervalued. Excellent. I'll then go over what I've learnt in the last 15 days. 15 days. Alexander's brows went up. Indeed, sir? I began to see odd trends at that point. Kesha ignored the hostile stares and moved gently across the room. The constant simultaneous phone calls, the constant absence of you, the chemicals that came and went from the kitchen, and most importantly, Mrs. Victoria's extremely detailed inquiries concerning his eating habits. Victoria laughed hysterically. Concerns regarding eating patterns. His fiancée is me. I naturally want to know how she's doing. Keisha acknowledged that it's normal, but it's not normal to inquire about specific chemical intolerances, precise meal timings, and whether he shares meals with others. The ensuing hush was deafening. A shiver went down Alexander's back. Victoria was dimly in his memory. She always poses those inquiries in a casual manner while posing as someone who cares about her. At that very moment, an unforeseen event occurred. One of the visitors, Dr. Marcus Henderson, a famous toxicologist, rose slowly to his feet. "I apologize, but in order to determine accurate dosages, a poisoner would ask those exact questions." Victoria paused. "You can't be serious. Dr. Henderson." In fact, he went on, readjusting his spectacles. "The chemical expertise displayed by he stared at Kesha piques my curiosity." Again, what was his name? Dr. Kesha, Washington. I appreciate you asking his name as well. The majority of folks here never give a damn. Alexander watched the exchange with increasing interest. Kesha's mannerisms didn't mesh well with a straightforward cleaning lady. Her use of technical terms, her direct eye contact, and her ability to remain composed under extreme pressure. Kesha was approached by Dr. Henderson. "You talked about being able to identify chemical substances. What sort of education do you possess?" Victoria attempted to cut him off. "Let's stop worrying about this chemical, please," Dr. Kesha answered plainly. "Class of 2007 at Howard University. I spent 3 years working in a pharmaceutical lab before deciding to change occupations due to unforeseen circumstances." There was a startled murmur throughout the room. A qualified scientist who works as a housekeeper. Everybody could see that the story didn't add up. Alexander moved forward. "What conditions?" "When I found irregularities in drug testing. I was falsely accused of theft," Kesha recalled, her voice laden with past anguish. "Overnight, my career in science came to an end. I was removed from the industry's blacklist." Dr. Henderson gave a sad nod. "I am familiar with these cases. Whistleblowers are not tolerated in the pharmaceutical sector." He looked across at Alexander. Maybe we ought to listen to what Dr. Washington has to say, Mr. Sterling. If I may make the suggestion, Alexander repeated, testing the words, Dr. Washington. Are you a doctorate holder? Kesha responded that she has a master's degree in analytical chemistry with a focus on toxicology. Since cleaning houses was the only job I could find, I did it for 12 years. However, I remained a scientist. Victoria was clearly in a panic. This is absurd. Are you going to believe fictitious stories created by a coldly Dr. Henderson? Cut her off. By a trained scientist who was using evidence to support their observations. Kesha grabbed the opportunity. Her Victoria, Mr. Sterling, didn't merely pose dubious queries. Her deliveries were similarly strange. Men in unmarked cars always delivered when you were traveling. Victoria yelled. That's a lie. October 16th, last Wednesday, at 3:15 p.m., Kesha went on gently. A 40-year-old Caucasian male is operating a black vehicle. The license plate is partially obscured. The delivery took place at the rear entryway. The meeting lasted 27 minutes. Alexander recoiled psychologically at the specificity of the information. Either Kesha had been watching and recording, or she was inventing it all with amazing inventiveness. How are you aware of all of this? What? Alexander inquired. Because I've discovered, after 12 years of being treated as invisible, that powerful individuals act dubious when they think no one is looking. Kesha turned to face Victoria. And since I've been recording everything for the last 15 days, Victoria made one final attempt. Will you let a bitter maid ruin our relationship with paranoid imaginations, Alexander, my love? However, Alexander had turned away from Victoria. A new emotion appeared on his face while his gaze remained focused on Kesha. Show respect. What sort of records? That night, Kesha smiled for the first time. It wasn't a happy smile, but rather the smile of someone who could at last show off well-guarded cards, pictures, audio recordings, chemical analyses of the vials I had located, and most importantly, 23-minute recording of an extremely instructive phone call. The blood in Victoria's veins appeared to freeze. What recording? The one from last Sunday when you were playing golf, Kesha said without raising an eyebrow. Victoria stumbled as though she had been punched. When you talked to someone named Tony about expediting the schedule and making sure nothing was left for further investigation, a number of people exchanged glances as they started to realize how serious the situation actually was. Alexander was approached by Dr. Henderson. Mr. Sterling, I strongly suggest you don't drink anything until we have completely clarified the situation. Alexander nodded, placing his glass firmly on the table. Kesha, he said, using his first name for the second time. Where is this evidence? In a safe place, she replied, and copies have already been sent to trusted individuals in case anything happens to me. It was at that moment that Victoria Blackwood realized she had completely underestimated her opponent. The simple cleaning lady was in fact a trained scientist, a meticulous investigator, and a strategist who had spent 15 days gathering irrefutable evidence. While Victoria desperately tried to think of a way out, Kesha remained calm, knowing that her most powerful card had not yet been revealed. Because the 23-minute recording didn't just show Victoria conspiring, it showed something much worse. Something that would turn that night into a nightmare Victoria could never have imagined. What no one in that room yet suspected was that Kesha Washington wasn't just defending Alexander Sterling's life, she was about to expose a web of corruption that reached far beyond that mansion. A conspiracy that would involve names that would make headlines for months. And it would all start with a simple question she was about to ask. A question that would make Victoria publicly confess to crimes that her herself didn't even know she had committed. The silence in the room was so thick it seemed physical. Victoria was visibly shaking. Her perfectly manicured hands now damp with cold sweat. The mention of the recording with Tony had completely destroyed her composure. What? Recording, Alexander repeated, his voice low, but laden with an authority that made everyone present lean forward. Kesha took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not only the fate of that evening, but possibly the rest of her life. Mr. Sterling, I've cleaned the houses of the elite for 12 years, and throughout that time, I've discovered that when powerful individuals feel isolated, they are more likely to perpetrate their worst crimes. Victoria made a final desperate move. You can't be serious about this, Alexander. She is an unhappy worker attempting to shut up. Victoria, Alexander replied icily while maintaining eye contact with his wife. Kasia pulled a tiny digital recorder from the pocket of her apron and said, "Continue." 3:17 p.m. on Sunday, October 21st. With her office door closed, Miss Victoria was speaking with Antonio Rossetti. Several of the guests exchanged glances at the name. Victoria told a desperate untruth. "I've never heard of this man." But her voice trailed off at the last sentence. Rossetti was known in business circles as a problem solver, a man who made things disappear for substantial sums of money. Dr. Henderson came over. "Could I have a look at that tape recorder?" The doctor took the device from Kasia, put on headphones, and listened for a short while. His face took a sharp turn. "I recommend that everyone listen to this, Mr. Sterling." Kasia hooked the recording to a portable sound system she had taken with her. Once Alexander nodded. The room was filled with Victoria's clear voice. "Please expedite the schedule, Tony. Regarding the money I sent to the Cayman Islands, Alexander is growing suspicious. I'm done if he finds out about the 12 million, even though I realize it's risky. No, he cannot simply vanish. It must appear organic, maybe a heart attack. Did you ensure that the material didn't leave any traces?" Shock screams erupted around the room. A few of the visitors got up suddenly. In horror, others covered their mouths. Alexander went completely white. The recording went on. "Excellent. How long would it take me to get complete access to the assets once he passes away? Fantastic. Have the fictitious will paperwork been prepared? Fantastic. The whole sterling fortune will be his in a week." When Victoria attempted to make her way to the door, 2 security officers had already taken up their positions. "This is a montage," she cried out in a fit of rage. "The technology is digital. You can fake it." For the first time, Kasia grinned. "With sincere contentment, that you brought up digital technology is interesting. Since I also had these high-resolution photos on the screen," she pulled a tablet from the cleaning bucket. At the mansion's rear entrance, Victoria greets a middle-aged guy. Dates and times are displayed with clear timestamps. One of the pictures showed Victoria passing along an envelope that was obviously full of cash. Calmly, Kasia pointed out that this was Antonio Rossetti. In New York criminal circles, he is also referred to as Tony and is an expert at deaths that appear to be natural. With a serious look, Dr. Henderson studied the pictures. "As a doctor, Mr. Sterling, I have to tell you that many contemporary substances can mimic heart attacks without leaving any evidence in traditional autopsy." Alexander stood up slowly, her stance exuding a subdued rage that caused even the security personnel to flinch. He said, "Victoria," in a tone so icy that it seemed to cool the room. "You took $12 million out of my companies." Victoria started to explain, but Alexander interrupted her. "And you had me killed by a trained assassin. It is not what it appears to be. To maintain a fortune that you did not contribute to." At last, Victoria lost it. She cried because she was angry at being found, not because she regretted anything. "You don't comprehend," she sobbed. "Pretending to adore you for 3 years, enduring his dull business, his pointless meetings, and his haughty friends for 3 years, I was worthy of that good fortune." There was utter silence in the room. 50 members of New York's elite had witnessed the complete confession. Kasia remained silent. She simply saw Victoria's public self-destruction with quiet elegance. Pulling out his cell phone, Alexander dialed 911. "Please, police. I need to report a murder attempt and a significant valuables theft." He gave Victoria his full attention. "I have the suspect here." Victoria became aware of the seriousness of her predicament at that same instant. She had confessed to attempted murder in front of numerous powerful witnesses, in addition to losing the riches she had long desired. Her carefully nurtured social ties vanished in an instant. Mr. Patterson got to his feet, clearly upset. "My wife and I are leaving, Alexander. This is not acceptable." Other attendees, obviously trying to get away from the situation, started to get up as well. Alexander went up to Kesha as they waited for the police. He introduced himself as Dr. Washington, for the first time. She just answered, "I just did what was right," to the statement, "You saved my life." "No," Alexander said with a headshake. Victoria was seated in a chair, under the watchful eyes of security guards, talking endlessly about how everything had been meticulously arranged, and how a simple cleaning lady had ruined everything. "You did much more than that. You showed me that I've spent years being blind to what really matters." Kesha was approached by Dr. Henderson. "I would like to know why you left chemistry to become a cleaning lady, Dr. Washington. A pharmaceutical laboratory falsely accused me of stealing," she said. "I found anomalies in drug tests and was silenced in the most heinous manner imaginable." Alexander paid close attention. "Which lab?" "Boston's Pharmac Industries." Alexander's brows went up. "Robert Morrison, the CEO, has been a business associate of mine for many years." He hesitated a long time, and based on what I saw today, I have no doubt that her false claim was not unfounded. In the distance, police sirens started to resound. Victoria looked up, finally realizing that costly gowns and fancy dinners would not be part of her new reality. Looking at Kesha with a mix of amazement and anger, she whispered, "How was a mere scientist able to?" Kesha simply corrected her. "You totally underestimated a basic scientist." Victoria Blackwood, one of Manhattan's most admired socialites, was arrested for attempted murder and $12 million theft just hours before the police arrived. Her intended victim was watching calmly, in stark contrast to the hysteria of the woman who had nearly killed him. None of the guests in attendance could have predicted that this night would not only represent the end of Victoria's criminal career, but also the start of an investigation that would reveal a network of corruption involving professional assassins, pharmaceutical companies, and criminal socialites that would garner months' worth of national attention. In the middle of it all, the lady that everyone had dismissed as invisible will emerge as the main character in one of the decade's most talked about criminal cases, demonstrating that justice can occasionally come from the most unlikely people, who possess the precise abilities to reveal the truth at the appropriate time. Victoria Blackwood exchanged her expensive gowns for an orange jail outfit. 6 months later, she now spent her days cleaning the restrooms at the Bedford Hills Women's Prison after being given a 15-year sentence for attempted murder and fraud. No one failed to realize the irony. The woman who had hated housekeepers was now one of them. Blackwood, an inmate, yelled at the guard, "Her visit has been cancelled." Nobody else visited her. She was treated like she didn't exist by her previous socialite acquaintances. CNN was interviewing Kesha Washington in her new position at Sterling Enterprises as Director of Scientific Investigations. Alexander had made the job especially for her, since he knew his business needed her analytical abilities. Kesha calmly responded, "I feel like I'm finally where I should have always been." The reporter asked, "How does it feel to be the first Black woman in an executive position at Sterling Enterprises? 12 years of cleaning houses taught me more about human character than any laboratory ever could." Victoria's arrest sparked an inquiry that revealed a network of corruption extending to Pharmac Industries. Federal charges were now pending against Robert Morrison, the CEO who had ruined Kesha's career years before. At last, justice had found its course. Kesha had received more than just a job offer from Alexander. He had given her the opportunity to start over from scratch. In addition to receiving an executive salary, he made sure the corporation would look into any cases like hers and established a $15 million fund for scientists who had been wrongfully persecuted. Alexander exclaimed, "You saved me," at the press conference unveiling Kesha's new role. "He taught me that great leadership entails hearing opinions that others would rather ignore. But more than that," he said. From her prison cell, Victoria watched the interview on television. seeing the woman she had hated suddenly being celebrated across the country as a model of honesty and tenacity. When Kesha was questioned about forgiveness, her hands shook. Kesha answered, "I hold no grudges," with the same composure she had displayed on that fatal evening. At the conclusion of the interview, Kesha stared straight into the camera. People, like Victoria, destroy themselves. My role was simply to ensure that the truth came to light. Anyone watching who has ever been undervalued, degraded, or rejected due to her background should keep in mind that knowledge is power, and when power is utilized honorably, it always triumphs over conceit based on privilege. In a modest wedding 2 years later, Kesha married Alexander because they found they had similar basic beliefs in fairness and human dignity, not because they were grateful or convenient. Victoria, who had intended to wed him for financial gain, watched the news from behind bars, aware that she had lost not just a lot, but also the opportunity to get to know a man who was genuinely deserving of her. Every headline, interview, and life changed by Kesha's example mirrored the lesson. It's possible that the person you hate now will decide his destiny tomorrow. Victoria had discovered the hard way that it is not just immoral, but also strategically deadly to undervalue someone because of bias. Kesha was creating a legacy that would demonstrate that real success comes from creating something bigger than adversaries could ever dream of, not from destroying them, while Victoria counted the days in her cell. Have you ever undervalued someone who turned out to be more powerful than you initially believed? For more tales that demonstrate that justice, even when it is delayed, always finds its way, leave a comment on her experience and subscribe to the channel.